Imagine you're standing outside your home at 2 in the morning. It's completely dark. No cars, no neighbors, just the sound of the wind moving across the empty land. Then suddenly, you see a light. It's not a plane. It's not a helicopter. And it isn't moving like anything you've ever seen before. You watch it descend toward the ground, and then it simply disappears. Now imagine this happens again and again. Except this time, something else happens. Your animals begin acting terrified. One of them disappears. And when you finally find it, something is horribly wrong. This isn't the opening of a horror movie. These are among the reports associated with a real 512-acre property in northeastern Utah, a place now known around the world as Skinwalker Ranch. But here's the question that has kept people obsessed with this place for decades. What if the strangest thing about Skinwalker Ranch isn't what people have seen, but what seems to happen when someone starts looking for? If you clicked because you want to know what actually happened at Skinwalker Ranch, you're in the right place. Tonight, we're going back to the beginning, before television crews, before rockets, before scientists, before the internet turned this property into one of America's most famous paranormal locations. We'll follow the reports from the family who lived there, the strange animal incidents, the mysterious lights, the investigations, and the disturbing phenomenon investigators later described as the Hitchhiker Effect. And at the end, we're going to separate what is actually documented from what remains an unexplained claim. Because the real story is stranger when you remove the exaggeration. Skinwalker Ranch sits in Utah's Uintah Basin. The property is approximately 512 acres, but the strange reputation of the region didn't begin with a television show. The Uintah Basin has a much longer history of UFO reports and unusual stories. And that matters, because if this were simply one isolated story from one isolated family, it would be much easier to dismiss. But reports of unusual activity existed in the surrounding region before Skinwalker Ranch became famous. The property itself was once known as the Sherman Ranch. And in the mid-1990s, a family named Terry and Gwen Sherman moved onto the land. They expected a quiet life. Instead, they said they encountered things they couldn't explain. And one of their first major problems involved something every rancher understands: their cattle. According to accounts later reported by journalists, the Shermans began experiencing strange incidents involving their cattle. Some animals reportedly disappeared. Others were found dead under unusual circumstances. And according to the family's account, some of the injuries appeared strangely precise. No obvious blood trail, no easy explanation. Then came something even more disturbing. The family reportedly began seeing strange lights in the sky, objects that appeared to move in ways they couldn't identify. One night, a light appeared over the property. The family watched it, but instead of behaving like a normal aircraft, it seemed to move in ways that terrified them. And then there were the animals. Imagine being alone on a ranch at night and hearing your cattle suddenly become agitated. You walk outside. You expect to see a predator. Instead, you see something that doesn't look quite right. According to later accounts, the family reported seeing an enormous wolf-like creature. Terry Sherman reportedly fired at it, but the creature appeared unaffected. Now, this is where the story becomes difficult, because there is no independently verified evidence proving that a bullet-resistant creature was actually on the property. It's a reported encounter, not a scientific fact. But the Shermans believed they had seen something, and they weren't the only people who would report strange experiences there. Here's where the Skinwalker Ranch story takes a completely different turn. Most haunted house stories have one basic pattern. Something strange happens, people investigate, and eventually they either find an explanation or they don't. Skinwalker Ranch didn't follow that pattern, because instead of abandoning the mystery, someone decided to investigate it scientifically. In 1996, billionaire businessman and UFO enthusiast Robert Bigelow purchased the property, and he didn't simply bring a group of ghost hunters. He established a research effort under the National Institute for Discovery Science, known as NIDS. Researchers monitored the property. Cameras were installed. People watched the land. And they were looking for one thing: evidence. But what happened next created a problem, because some researchers later claimed they saw things they couldn't explain. The researchers weren't looking for a scary story. They wanted data. According to accounts later published about the investigation, researchers reported unusual lights, strange animal incidents, and other unexplained events. One of the most famous claims involved a creature described as being enormous and wolf-like. Another involved a strange humanoid figure reportedly seen in a tree. There were also reports of glowing objects, unusual sounds, and phenomena that witnesses believed didn't behave according to normal physical expectations. But here's the part that often gets lost on YouTube. The investigators did not solve the mystery, and they didn't produce universally accepted scientific evidence proving that the ranch was haunted by demons, aliens, or interdimensional beings. That's important, because unexplained doesn't automatically mean supernatural. It simply means we don't have a confirmed explanation. And that uncertainty is exactly what made Skinwalker Ranch so fascinating. But then investigators began focusing on one particular feature of the property, a massive geological formation known as the Mesa. For years, people interested in the ranch have wondered whether something unusual could be hidden beneath or inside it. And this is where the story becomes almost impossible to separate from modern Skinwalker Ranch mythology. Because over the years, investigators have used increasingly sophisticated technology. Sensors, cameras, ground-penetrating equipment, drones, aircraft, and other instruments. The current television investigation has continued that search, with the Mesa and surrounding areas remaining major areas of interest. And in 2026, the investigation is still ongoing, which means there is no final answer waiting at the end of this video. And that's exactly why people keep watching. But perhaps the most disturbing part of the Skinwalker Ranch story isn't the ranch itself. It's what some people claim happened after they left. Investigators and witnesses have described what became known as the Hitchhiker Effect. The idea is terrifying. Something strange happens at Skinwalker Ranch. Someone leaves the property, and then unexplained events allegedly follow them home. Strange lights, unusual experiences, paranormal encounters, health problems, disturbing dreams, or other events that witnesses associate with their time at the ranch. Now, there is an important distinction here. The Hitchhiker Effect is a reported phenomenon and a part of the ranch's lore and investigation history. It is not established scientific fact, but think about the psychological impact. If you believed something had followed you home, how would you sleep that night? Would you check your windows? Would you look at the sky? Would you listen differently when you heard a noise outside? And most importantly, what would happen if you started believing that the thing watching you knew you were watching it too? This is where Skinwalker Ranch becomes more than a story about UFOs, because fear doesn't begin when you see a monster. Fear begins when you can't explain what you're seeing. Think about a normal night. You're lying in bed. You hear something hit the window. Your brain immediately creates possibilities. Was it a bird? A branch? Someone outside? You don't know, so you check. Nothing. You go back to bed. Then you hear it again. Now your brain changes the story. It starts looking for patterns. That's how uncertainty works. And Skinwalker Ranch is basically a giant uncertainty machine. A light appears. What was it? An animal disappears. Why? A sensor records something strange. Equipment malfunction? Human error? Something else? Every unanswered question creates another question. And that's how curiosity turns into obsession. And here's why this story is especially interesting right now. Skinwalker Ranch isn't simply a historical mystery. The investigation is still being presented to audiences in 2026. Season 7 is currently airing, and online communities are still actively debating the latest claims, experiments, and theories surrounding the ranch. That means you're not watching a mystery that completely disappeared decades ago. You're watching a mystery that people are still arguing about today. Some believe there is genuinely something unusual happening there. Others believe the television presentation exaggerates ordinary events. And some think the entire mystery can eventually be explained by science. But there is one problem. Nobody has produced an explanation that satisfies everyone. So, is Skinwalker Ranch actually haunted? Are aliens visiting the property? Is there some kind of underground structure? Is it connected to another dimension? Or is something much more ordinary happening, and humans are simply connecting unrelated events? Here's what we can say with confidence. The property exists. The historical reports exist. The investigations happened. Witnesses have described unusual experiences. The ranch has been studied for decades, and the mystery remains controversial. But the extraordinary explanations remain explanations, not proven facts. And maybe that's what makes this story more frightening. Because when you see a monster, You know what you're afraid of. When you don't know what you're looking at, your imagination does the rest. For decades, people have tried to answer one question: what's inside Skinwalker Ranch? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, why do people keep experiencing things they believe they can't explain? Because the ranch has survived every generation of investigators. The Shermans left. Bigelow's researchers investigated. Later owners continued the research. Television crews arrived. Scientists and technicians brought increasingly advanced equipment. And still, the mystery continues. The strange thing isn't that someone claims to have seen something. The strange thing is that the story keeps generating new claims, new theories, and new investigations. And every time someone says, "We're finally going to find the answer," another mystery seems to appear. So if you ever find yourself driving through the empty roads of Utah at night and you see a strange light hovering over the desert, don't automatically assume it's a plane. Don't assume it's a star, and definitely don't assume you've discovered something supernatural. Because sometimes the scariest answer isn't knowing what you're looking at. It's realizing you have absolutely no idea what you're looking at. And somewhere in the darkness of the Uintah Basin, there's a 512-acre piece of land where people have been asking that question for decades. What do you think Skinwalker Ranch really is? A genuine unexplained phenomenon? A series of coincidences? Something psychological? Or something we haven't discovered yet? Tell me your theory in the comments. And if you want more real American mysteries, unexplained encounters,